Welcome to the A Minute to Midnight show, folks. This is Tony coming to you from New Zealand, and with me on the show I have Leo Hohmann. Leo's been a guest a few times on the show, and it's good to have you back.
Yes, thank you for having me on, Tony. Good to be back.
And you've had a few new articles recently, I've seen, and in fact one you've just posted on your website, so maybe you could tell people where your website is for a start.
Yeah, I'm at leohohmann.com. That's just my name.com, leohohmann.com.
Yep, that's cool. So just before we get into your latest article, I just want to go back to one you wrote recently called Globalists Make Final Push for Depopulated One World Order. And I found it really interesting in that article that you posted an excerpt from a book by Dennis Meadows, written in 1972, called Limits to Growth, which was endorsed by the Club of Rome and is still sold on its website today. The Club of Rome was the originator of the goals contained in the United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development, and among those goals was the need for fewer human beings on the planet Earth. Meadows argued in his book for a drastic depopulation program. This is from your article. So here's the quote from that book. "We can have 1 billion people with freedom or 9 billion slaves. We're at over 7 billion right now, so we need to bring that down to 1 billion. I hope that culling can be peaceful and slow and equal between rich and poor." Dennis Meadows, author of Limits to Growth, the Club of Rome. I thought, wow, if that isn't an admission of the plan, then what is? And of course, we know others have repeated similar things since, but that's right there in the Club of Rome book. So, wow.
Yeah, that Tony was actually not in his book, I don't believe. That was in a video he stated in an interview earlier this year. I think it was around April of this year.
Oh, wow.
And the video is embedded there in the article. And you can play the video and listen to him and watch him saying this. It's really quite remarkable. He says that we could go, we're currently at 7.5 billion. We could go to 8 or 9 billion if we wanted to live in a complete dictatorship. A dictatorship ruled by, he calls it a smart dictatorship, which would be another way, I think, of referring to a technocracy, which is, a technocracy is a dictatorship of experts, of so-called, engineers, doctors, scientists, data collectors, bureaucrats, unelected people in general who claim to have some sort of expertise that the rest of us are not privy to. And they tend to work at companies like Microsoft, Facebook, Google, and the like. And if we don't want to be ruled by a dictatorship of those type of people, Mr. Meadows said that we need to reduce our global population by about 86%. Okay, we need to go down to 1 or 2 billion people, he said. So you're talking about a population reduction of anywhere from 80 to almost 90% of the people in the world today need to be eliminated. This is his words, not mine. And as you stated, he is not just anybody casually walking down the street. This is the guy who authored that 1972 book, Limits to Growth, which was very much acclaimed by United Nations, World Economic Forum type globalist elitists as the way forward in an ever-increasing populated world. And so they look to people like him for instructions on how to achieve their goals, and he's saying that we need drastic population reduction. Now, he's not the only one saying this. Shortly after his book came out in 1972, we had Henry Kissinger come out in 1974 with the Kissinger Report, which also said that the Western nations, the so-called free world, would be increasingly threatened by people in the third world as they became more industrialized and in need of ever greater amounts of energy and resources. And so the West needed to pursue a policy of population reduction. This was in 1974, and Bill Gates, as you know, and his cohorts at the Gates Foundation, Dr. Fauci, and these types of people have also called for population reduction. And so it's not just, this guy is not just an outlier, a one-off. He's just the latest in a long string of people, globalists, global predators, as I call them, who say that we basically have two choices: dictatorship or death. And I don't see them lining up to be first on the list to be eliminated. Do you?
No, it's interesting. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, we could live in a population like blah, blah, blah. Well, what about you being one of the ones that isn't in that population then?
Right, right. Why don't you set the example for us and get the lethal injection?
Yeah, well, I hate to say it, but I think a lot of the population have had the lethal injection.